Hey, hey, happy Thursday! We are going to continue reading Fannie. Fannie never flinched. We just found out that she got out of jail, and then she was pardoned for what she was charged with. So the president said, that the charges were not valid and she could be released from those. So she was out and about now. They did say like they didn't blame her if she wanted to give in after being in jail for so long and how serious everything had become, but she said she's not giving up, so she's continuing to fight for the unions and for the rights of the workers. So when you see here, this is Andrew Carney's main residence was a mansion on Fifth Avenue in New York City. Here, he's pictured at his golf cottage in Westchester County, New York, 1911. And then to the right here, you have children standing in the dirt street of a company coal town, showing typical houses with a mine shaft in the background. This is Western Pennsylvania, 1910. Despite prejudice, the immigrants exhibited a pioneering spirit, building ethnic churches, grocery stores, and fraternal halls. But their well-tended vegetable gardens and small frame houses and privies were blackened with soot from coal-burning steel plants nearby. Privies would be like little bathrooms or outhouses. Families couldn't seem to get ahead. Fathers and son followed paths down the bluff to the nearby coal mines in Breckenridge, where they worked 12-hour days 6 days a week. On payday, near the entrances to the mines, lines of maimed and debilitated workers begged for handouts. Pennsylvania coal country was the most dangerous place to work in America. Death and injury waited in the dark shafts where rock fractured and crashed down without warning. And on average, a man died in the mines every day, often crushed by coal cars or killed by explosions. When children heard the whistle blow, they stopped playing and ran home. They waited with their mothers, hearts pounding, as men came up the street carrying the limp body. Covered with coal dust, miners' faces all looked alike. At which house would the silent procession stop? Sooner or later, nearly every family lost a father, a brother, or a son. But that's not why Union people called it Black Valley. The dismal name came from the bleak opportunities workers faced in the region, where iron, coal, and steel companies had busted unions for 2 decades. Fighting between labor unions and mine owners was so fierce they called it labor war. So anytime the whistle would blow, it meant that somebody died in the mine. And they're saying that this is one of the most deadly places to work in America, the most deadly mine. And they were still refusing to allow unions in to have equal pay and to have better working conditions. And that even on payday, when they'd go to get their paychecks after working 6 12-hour days, they still wouldn't have enough. They would still be begging for food. So an injured miner receives treatment here in this picture at the emergency hospital at a Pennsylvania mine. The date is unknown on this one. A millionaire named Lewis Hicks ran 14 mines where bosses treated workers like slaves. He paid less than other companies did, made his miners work 2 hours a day longer, and cared little if miners got hurt on the job. Every day, Fannie talked to Black Valley miners and their families, telling the women they deserved to live like Americans, to have bathtubs and indoor plumbing and sanitary homes with curtains on the windows. Their children were entitled to a proper education and a balanced diet. She convinced thousands of miners to join the UMWA and even influenced their children, who refused to play with others whose fathers didn't join. When the union voted to strike, 8,000 men walked off the job. They sent up picket lines outside the mines. This picture here is Pennsylvania's mounted coal and iron police were notoriously brutal. Miners nicknamed them Cossacks. In Russia, Cossack soldiers hired by the Caesars, their massacred people. Hello? Sorry, I thought someone stopped in here. And burned villages to put down peasant uprisings and destroy Jewish communities. Mine operators vowed to break the union. They advertised for workers willing to cross the picket line. Hicks and the other owners hired guards, passed out guns, and sent men to patrol company boundaries. Everyone in Black Valley tensed, like soldiers waiting for battle. Fannie didn't flinch. It was rare for a woman to do this kind of work, but she walked the picket lines with the men and rallied strikers to stick it out. She tried to keep peace while the miners and guards heckled one another and often came to blows. During one scuffle, a family guard assaulted Fannie. She pressed charges but lost in court. Luckily, her injuries were not life-threatening. The strike staggered on for weeks, months, nearly a year. Mining families scratched out a living any way they could, with the union providing strike pay from dues paid by members in other parts of the country. So let me explain that a little more. There's this union, it was across the whole country, across America. And so people like in Ohio, let's say, that union would pay into these union dues, and then it could benefit people in Virginia or Pennsylvania who were striking. So they said, here, we'll pay into this union because you've given us a better life, we get more money, our working conditions are better. If you need to use this to pay for those that are striking and not getting paid because they're not working, you can do that. So that's how they were able to strike, was there was a strike fund set up, paid for by other union members. So company guards threatened, thrashed, and sometimes shot striking miners. Miners drummed up guns and shot back. Homemade bombs exploded at the houses of non-union men and wrecked company, buildings, and machinery. The sheriff and local judges enforced the law only when it suited the coal companies. Fannie knew the sheriff's deputies doubled as Lewis Hicks's armed thugs. Hicks's men knew Fannie too. They didn't want her kind of troublemaker around. Rumors spread that the deputies joked about killing her. Fannie must have wondered if it was time to quit. So the authorities wanted to kill her because she was trying to make the world a better place. All these years, she had believed that if workers stuck together, they'd win a fair share of the money made by their muscle and sweat. The struggle had taken nearly half her life. Her children had grown and had children of their own. Still, the fight went on. The courts, local lawmen, and state and national troops all lined up against the union organizers. Maybe her dream was impossible. Fannie's dream lives on. Black Valley, Pennsylvania, 1917. When Lewis Hicks could not hire enough local strike breakers, he went south, offering jobs to people who didn't know what it was like in Black Valley. Black sharecroppers, cotton pickers, and miners, making even lower wages in Alabama, jumped at the chance. They boarded a train in Birmingham, and the guards locked the doors of the cars to keep union organizers from getting to them. Hicks didn't tell the eager-for-work men that he paid low wages. He didn't tell them about the strike, and he didn't tell them that the people in the Alkiski Valley might try to kill them for taking their jobs. So Lewis hired people to go down to Alabama, say, hey, why don't you come up here to Pennsylvania, and you can work in our coal mine. And it's like beautiful, and they made it all sound like it was wonderful. But what they didn't tell them, they put them on this train, they locked them in, so that union workers couldn't get to them. And they didn't tell them about how many people were dying in these coal mines, that they paid terribly in these coal mines. They made it sound beautiful. They got them all on this train, and then they were headed to Pennsylvania. So let's see what happens. Union men bunched together outside the mine. They had heard about the train carrying scabs and were ready to face down the strike breakers. If they didn't stop these Southerners from working the mines, the strike would fail. The Union would be crushed again. But Fannie had a plan. She waited at a railroad signal outside town where the train would slow and maybe stop. If she could speak to the men on the train, she hoped to convince them to join the Union. Here's a picture of the train, early 1900s Pennsylvania railroad locomotive, similar to the one that Fannie Sellens intersected as it carried strike breakers to Lewis Hicks's mine in Alkiski Valley. She had succeeded in St. Louis, she had succeeded in West Virginia, but the mine operations in Black Valley seemed more dangerous. Men with guns guarded the train whenever it stopped, the same men who had threatened to kill her. Still, when the train came into view, steam engine hissing, pistons hammering, Fannie picked up her skirts and ran alongside the train cars, shouting at the men inside. They stared at the woman scrambling over the rugged ground with her hairpins falling out, and opened the windows to hear what she was hollering about. "Don't break the strike!" she called to them. "Support the union!" Could it be true, they wondered? Had they traveled all this way to help bust a union? "Why else have they locked us in here?" one said. "That's right. No other reason for it," said another. More windows came down. Men inside the locked cars pounded on the doors. "We can't get out!" Fannie shouted, "Workers unite! Power to the union!" One man climbed out of the train window and dropped to the ground. Those left behind cheered. Up and down the track, men climbed from the windows and jumped to the ground. Fannie shook the hand of every man who fled the train, then marched them down the tracks. 100 men from Alabama crossed a bridge and paraded into town, where Union families lined the street, clapping and cheering. If a man wanted to go home, the Union gave him a ticket on the next train back. Those workers who wanted to join the strike were welcomed into the Union. The strikers held fast at Hicks mines, but world events intervened. On April 6, 1917, the United States entered World War I. To support the country's war effort, the striking miners gave up many of their demands and went back to work. Under new wartime regulations, the United States government brokered a wage deal with coal mine operations across the nation, and Lewis Hicks agreed to give miners a 50% pay raise. 50% is quite a lot. All right, go ahead and fill out the Google Slides for today and have a great day.